Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. We're grateful to you for joining us tonight and for being part of our community. My name is Elric. I am a board member of the Jung Association of Western Massachusetts. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you just a little about the Jung Association of Western Massachusetts. We are a mostly volunteer organization founded in 1996, concerned with promoting and exploring in community with others the ideas of the great depth psychologist Carl Gustav Jung. I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce you to our board members and to the members of our advisory board and thank them for their good work on behalf of the association. Christine Olson is our president. Penelope Tarasuk and Erica Lorenz are current board members and advisors, and they are two of the longest serving members on the board. Erica served previously as our president. Both are authors and practicing Jungian analysts. Judy Hall is our bookkeeper. Peter O'Brien is our speaker liaison. We welcome Janine Cooper, our newest board member, who will be our treasurer going forward. I serve as public relations liaison and promotional coordinator for the association. We are also very grateful to the members of our advisory board. Author, poet, and depth psychotherapist, Dr. Ed Tick, who previously served on our board of directors. Psychologist and therapist Dr. Carol Beauvais, who also previously served on our board of directors. Retired family therapist and historian Peter Williams, who also previously served on our board of directors. And Joe Coolin, who was the former publisher of Parabola magazine and who has recently become a children's book author. We thank them all for their many ongoing contributions and for their much sought after sage wisdom. On behalf of our president and the members of the current board, I want to offer many thanks to those of you who have stepped forward to consider participation in our association as volunteers or as candidates to serve on the board. We asked and you responded. If you have any interest and you are local to Western Massachusetts, please contact our president, Christine Olson. I think you can find her email in the chat room tonight or on our website. Many kind thanks to Andrew Grant, who will be providing Zoom and technical assistance tonight. Thank you, Andrew. Upcoming events. Please join us in person on Sunday, April the 13th at 4 p.m. at Smith College Campus Center, and that will be in room 102. For our continuing film and discussion series, where we present a Jung-related film. We watch the film together for about 40 minutes, and then we open up for a general discussion. Whether you're well acquainted or new to Jung, this is a wonderful opportunity to get together with others to learn and to share. These have so far been wonderful events. Where we all get to have some soul talk with each other. It's been really great. So join us on April 13th. We'll continue with interviews with Marion Woodman, and we'll exploring the divine feminine. Some of the subjects we'll cover in the next film are the three aspects of the triple goddess, the virgin, mother, and crone, as well as the masculine and feminine in the marriage relationship. Marion relates a deep and insightful wisdom from her years as a Jungian analyst and from her position at the time of the interviews as a respected elder and wise woman. So please join us April 13th. Check our website for more information on this or any other of our events. You'll also find archives on the website where there are videos of past lectures and events. The website is westmassjung.org. Please note that tonight will be our last lecture of this season's series. Our May lecture, unfortunately, had to be canceled. So tonight will be our last in the series for this year. We will return next season, beginning in October, when we will present Angie Brenner, who will share a tale of Selkies and the sea wife, the seal wife. Angie presented with us once before, and her talk was very popular, and we all enjoyed it. I hope you can join us for that. And now we will move on to tonight's lecture. Tonight's lecture is titled Madness, Wildness, and Pan's Return. Ryan Maher is a psychotherapist, a writer, and a seasoned presenter. He's a graduate of the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, where he studied clinical counseling with a focus on trauma. His interests include dream work, liminality, and depth relational approaches to psychotherapy. He's appeared on the Myth Salon and the podcast Jung in the World. In 2018, he completed a certificate program in Jungian psychotherapy through the Jung Institute of Chicago, where he is an affiliate member. Ryan is also a member of the National Board of Certified Counselors, the Breath Network, and the Jungian Psychotherapists Association. And now, without further ado, I believe he's joining us from Seattle. Please welcome Ryan Maher. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Elric. To clarify, the Jungian Psychotherapists Association of Seattle, not New York. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for having me here today. It is an honor to be here. I thought my time with Pan was done a year ago when Peter reached out to me. And to be frank, I was kind of ready to be done, but Pan was not done with me, apparently, for better or for worse. So hopefully for better. I think so. Re-engaging Pan lore has been really fruitful and a journey for me this past year. So I'm very grateful to Peter and to the board of the Jung Association of Western Massachusetts. I spent 3 weeks at Kripalu in the Berkshires 20 years ago. I miss it. That area is beautiful and Pan-like, actually. Got your own Arcadia over there. So let's jump in and see where we go. Oh, I do want to thank Dana White, who sadly and tragically passed away. He opened up a lot of doors for me and invited me onto the Myth Salon. And Dr. Boris Nunley, who was very instrumental in my thinking around themes of wildness from a non-colonized perspective. So I'm greatly indebted to them and to Dr. Gus Swick of the Chicago Institute, who's informed my thinking tremendously. So let's jump in. Okay. Are there any delays? Are we good? Is the PowerPoint looking good? Okay. There we go. So the subject this evening is Pan. And we must approach Pan with nuance. He represents a coincidence of the opposites, coincidentia oppositorium. He is a shadow carrier par excellence, which we will see in tonight's presentation. And as such, he offers much in the way of finding ourselves through activated complexes, through panic, through anxiety, through states of heightened tension, which we're swimming in. So as we venture into his realm, let us be prepared to experience a wide range of emotions, to be with paradox, and to expand the parameters of our own not knowing. Quick outline of this evening, we're going to look at Pan as an archetypal image, staying with the image of Pan. We'll go into his origins as a mythological figure briefly, very, very briefly, but more as a subjective figure in the Greek pantheon, looking at his psychology, relational trauma, splitting and dissociation, as a figure who says a lot in the way of complex activation. We'll highlight stories around the nymphs and Pan's military excursions as manifestations of Pan complex. And then we'll take a look at his death and its implications. We aim to analyze the symbolism of Pan and its archetypal, psychological, and cultural significance. Develop a mythopoetic understanding of trauma and related processes through Pan's mythology. And evaluate how his mythology shapes an understanding of our collective crises. I am so indebted to these four texts. They have been instrumental in my thinking, my appreciation of Pan. So I want to honor that. Before I jump into what I think about Pan as an image, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to take us through 6 images. And I'd like for you to notice 2 things. One thing, through your outward gaze, what do you notice in the image? The image as a whole, or the painting as a whole. Jot those down. And then the inward gaze, what does the image evoke in you? We'll spend a few moments with each image. If you've got paper, pen, or a Word document, just jot down some things. We'll go into breakout groups briefly afterwards, and I can talk about that. And so just allow yourself to get lost in the image. Okay, so if we could just break out into small groups, Andrew, and give everyone a chance to share if they'd like to.
Okay. The groups will be running for 10 minutes. You'll have a 2-minute warning at the end. And we should be good to go.
I just want to say thank you, Ryan, for starting us right off with image and imagination, and it was very rich. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Christine. Glad it was welcomed. I'd like to offer that up before I start tinkering in with my own take on Pan. So here we go. Unless anyone else wants to, a few more minutes here, if anyone's moved to share.
Sorry. The images were really wonderful, and we liked the variety of them in our group, and that they gave us different impressions. And we were definitely discussing, the overall character of Pan and his archetypal qualities from, ancient and trickster and animal-like and, threatening, fearful, but delightful, that he has those opposites, like you mentioned in the beginning, and that he's disappeared from our consciousness largely, and how we'd like to reconnect. It's kind of the things our group was talking about. Thank you for sharing and for that opportunity.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah. He has disappeared from our consciousness only to gather strength in the unconscious, right? And to constellate that energy.
Well,
The duality. Yes, Judy.
Just picking up on that, we did speak about how there was not being drawn in. He wasn't a compelling in these images, and it was a kind of a surprise that there wasn't an attraction. Instead, there was this feeling of, whoa, I'm not so sure about, and even in some of the images, some fear. And so when you just said he's disappeared into the unconscious, so that's the shadowy nature of this fellow. Yeah.
Precisely. I don't know if I can go back the way my computer is working right now, but the images are largely either him alone or him in a lot of opposition with the other figures, or really close, right? Like impeding on those boundaries. So we'll look into these dynamics more deeply.
Can I add something here?
Please, Elliot.
It didn't occur to me until after I saw the images a second time after the group that the images that were painted, and I see a lot were from the 19th century, were, it seemed, not necessarily depicting an image of what Pan was, but the experience of the man who painted it, of the Pan energy in himself, rather than objectifying, an image of Pan. I'd like to just throw that out as a possibility. So whereas there, it might have been, it is that wildness or that satyr-like in some cases, or that union with the pastoral internally, that I think the artist may be trying to depict through the image of Pan, rather than some projection of what the god was said to be.
Yeah, such a rich offering, Elliot, perspective. As I was gathering, these images, and of course I'm curating them too for the purpose of the themes that I wanted to draw out. But you see how people are relating to Pan differently, and precisely what's responding inside of them through Pan. Penelope?
I see Penelope there, and then Thankful.
It's the first time I ever looked at Pan and thought of him as shamanic in that he's half man, half animal, much like centaurs, but only clearly half man and half animal. And I saw the trickster part of the shaman in him, but I'd never seen him as a shaman archetype before.
Corresponds so beautifully with we look back and we realize things in hindsight. Before I ever really got into Pan, I had a dream of a shamanic-like figure who had the pupils of a goat. And it wasn't until Hillman's Pan and the Nightmare came into my life that I made those connections. Yeah. Thankful and Rosemary.
I just wanted to mention, and we don't have the image on the screen, but the one in which Pan is in the picture, he's on the left playing his flute, but sitting what seemed to be atop a forum or a temple. And to my because Pan, as a worshipped figure way back when, was never worshipped in the temples. And so my thought was, oh, once we try to put him in a temple, that indicates to me part of his decline, because he was not about civilization. So I found that image to be particularly interesting, and I'd like to see it again. Oh, there it is. Yeah. And I didn't really pay attention at the moment to the people on the right. But there's just something about that image that feels, it feels as though it's being developed from a point of civilization, not a point of him in nature. Just a thought.
I love that thought. And what's fascinating is he looks young, he looks youthful there. So there's another contrast, dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know that this is a time when, it has those implications of a decline. And, after he did intervene in the Battle of Marathon, you started seeing shrines closer to the Parthenon, and but this was towards the end. Yeah.
Try to put him in a temple.
Yeah. Like cutting down of the sacred groves, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Rosemary.
Go. Well, I just wanted to say that what I liked about the figure was this feeling of freedom, this feeling of you can't own me. I'm beyond that, If you try and capture me, I just take off into the woods or the ocean, the plants. I mean, I'm just completely. There's a freedom about this person, this figure that is very rebellious and something that's very interesting in the face of all of the dramas that we're in right now. That this figure has an imperviousness to that, all of that stuff that we're so vulnerable to.
Thank you. That's so accurate. Yeah, I love those insights. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you,
Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks for being here with us tonight. I figured I'd get your perspective on something I did get very familiar with. One being Pan's role in the marathon and with Pheidippides, and also my understanding the etymology of the word panic coming from him, and the reason I kind of chose him as the Greek god to follow in Greece was because I was dealing with panic disorder. So I don't know if you can speak to either of those.
I think we're going to be in that material through the presentation. So could we save that for the end? And because we might hit on those points, we're going to talk a little bit about his military involvement. Is that okay, Jonathan?
Oh, undoubtedly. I must be coming in not sure what part of the presentation I'm joining in at.
Yeah. Well, it is both points with his involvement in marathon and being the root of the word panic are central. Not the Battle of Marathon. We'll kind of get to the edges of that, but this is the water we're swimming in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's take a look here at another manifestation of the duality through the competition between Apollo and Pan, this musical competition. And it speaks to the tension between civilization and the wilderness that Pan represents. Apollo being the god of reason, solar consciousness, elegantly dressed, and Pan is naked, and his music is wild and rustic and chaotic. And Rosemary, you said free, right? In free form. Apollo's is harmonious and ordered. Apollo does, and in the end, it's deemed he wins a musical competition. But as we'll see later in the presentation, it's not so simple, right? And I think we all know where Pan's origins are geographically. His genealogy, in keeping with his mercurial nature, he has Bourgeois references 14 different versions of his ideology. I've chosen to focus on one because of how it, for me, helped me understand Pan's impulses, his compulsiveness through a lens of complex trauma. Hermes' desire found fulfillment, and a magic child was born with goat's feet and goat's horn, crowing and laughing. When his mother had borne him, she sprang up and fled, leaving none to suckle the child. So terrified was she when she saw its wild and bearded face. Now, this is an interesting response. We have the creation of a total split here. Hermes picks Pan up, wraps him in a hare's pelt, and hastily brings him to Olympus. He sat down beside Zeus and the other gods and introduced his son to them. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this story, but the immortals were delighted with the child in this almost, erotic, objectifying way. Dionysus, most of all, the other god of madness, and they named him Pan because all had been pleased by him. His name is often confused with meaning all, right? That's kind of a more recent interpretation, more in keeping actually with pastoral, but we can appreciate this severe split in the rejection from the mother figure, and then a inflation that would feed Pan's need for not just acceptance or approval, but for adoration. Before proceeding further, my own desire for sensitivity and cautiousness, I want to speak to biases and our notions of attachment, how that comes from a predominantly Western model. We don't have to only have one primary caregiver, and let us not continue to perpetuate misogynistic norms that place healthy attachments exclusively on an individual mother. There is a great article in the reference section by Music that gets more deep into these nuances of attachment theory, but I want to offer that disclaimer and also let us continue to appreciate attachment theory, what happens when we're born into situations that are threatening, traumatic, filled with rejection or violence. Pan shows us what happens. I love this quote, a great trauma book, if anyone is interested. Can't see it, but you can read it. So we're going to continue on. Jung's insights of, I'm going to see if I can close that window out and then see more on my screen. There we go.
Ryan, could you go back to the one before? I didn't have a chance to read it.
There we go. Yeah, I can see it now. Intersubjective failure in primary interpersonal relationships is at the root of intrapersonal dissociation. intersubjective failure in the primary interpersonal relationships plural. Pan's dissociative tendencies I see as partially represented in his inability to really initially move through well-populated towns and cities. He is a peripheral figure on the edges in the wilderness. So if we were to conceptualize the center of consciousness as Apollo's city, civilization, the wilderness as othered, Pan's domain and centeredness in the wilderness can be conceived psychologically as a form of his own dissociative tendencies and split self states. The trauma then lends itself to the birth of various complexes. As Jung points out, the existence of complexes throws serious doubt on the naive assumption of the unity of consciousness, which is equated with psyche, and on the supremacy of the will. Every constellation of a complex postulates a disturbed state of consciousness. And unity of consciousness is disrupted, and the intentions of the will, Apollo, totally irrelevant here, right? Is impeded or made impossible. Bourgault's text from the 80s, The Cult of Pan, and then his article, The Death of Pan, great text. He identifies two ends of a pole between panalepsy and panic, which I found fit really nicely in helping us conceptualize what's occurring when a complex rooted in the archetypal image of Pan gets activated. On the one end, panalepsy, which is a invasion of Pan energy from a purely physical, historical sense, it would be like a seizure associated with Pan taking over an individual. The possession of Pan is what occurs here. And it sets into motion this feedback loop of longing and then attempted possession, always to be frustrated and never really fulfilled. And Bourgault identifies the seeds of this being born in the ecstatic, erotic reception that Pan receives when Hermes shuffles him off to Olympus. And oh, forget about the fact that your mother abandoned you, right? Forget about this wild bearded face. They love you. On the other end of the pole, we've got panic, and this is occurring when Pan is not in consciousness, when there's no relatedness to Pan energy, the instincts. I don't look at technology, but that is an area that I think holds so much relevance, is how we're becoming further distanced from Pan the more we're getting plugged in. We might have more to say about that in the Q&A from folks who are in the tech realm. We'll look at panalepsy as exhibited through Pan's relationship with the nymphs, and panic as manifested through his military involvement with the Gauls. Complexes have not only an obsessive, but very often a possessive character. And here we are with the features of Panelepsy. This image depicting Pan and Syrinx, where Pan is chasing Syrinx. You know, there's this theme with Syrinx and Pitys, if I'm pronouncing that right. Echo, yes. Yeah, I think I'm thinking of Echo as the third, where they become disembodied, right? Syrinx turns into reeds, which becomes Pan's flutes. Pitys turns into a pine tree. And so there is a transformation which protects them from Pan's pursuits. However, it also functions to remove their own embodiment through human form. The violations of personal boundaries at the one end, the persecutory end of the spectrum. But we also have, contrary to this, Pan as a protector of the nymphs. Fontainebleau, in her text shown at the beginning, The Archetypal Pan in America, Hypermasculinity and Terror, she states that when Pan was not on the hunt, the nymphs were safe with him. He was their protector and they were his dear nymphs. We'll look at some images that depict a more related dynamic between Pan and the nymphs towards the end. But it so quickly changes, where he becomes the persecutor, and his own woundedness manifesting in the relentless pursuit, to try to ease his own distraught abandonment, fear of rejection. Fairbairn's endopsychic structure of the psyche fits really nicely with Pan's psychology. He identified three self-object pairings connected by the affective relationship in the healthy development, the good enough, as Winnicott would say, parenting. The affect is healthy, it's developed between the idealized object or the primary caregiver, and the central ego is intact and well formed. And this remains in consciousness in the overwhelming situation where needs are not met, or there's abandonment, rejection, neglect, physical violence. The defense mechanisms come into play here, and these parts are split off into the unconscious because they're impossible to hold consciously. And we have the formation of the anti-libidinal ego and the libidinal ego. The anti-libidinal ego's purpose is to preserve and protect the child, the individual, through a corresponding rejection or aggression, directed outwards towards the parts that need love, affirmation, validation, relationship, intimacy, and directed, those would be directed inward, I suppose. But then also directed outwards towards other objects that could represent that. The need for love, though, obviously doesn't get extinguished. And so the libidinal ego is still chugging along, totally separate and out of awareness with the anti-libidinal ego, finding objects to attach to and hope for love. The exciting object here in the mythology of Pan would be the nymphs. Pan is also bisexual, though. Daphnis would be another example here. of a love object who he then violates in his relentless pursuit. And there is the anti-libidinal ego coming in, right? It's he is inducing panic. Let us hold the figures and not separate. So the nymphs as representative of a part of Pan's own psychology, he's terrorizing a part of himself. And what he's doing is he's reinforcing his own isolation. And so that need for love, panalepsy, libidinal ego, continues to get frustrated. Martha Stark, who has a great lecture at Smith, talks about the tendency to create three relational tendencies that continue on in life, later in life, after these situations occur in childhood. It's possible that a legitimately good object will be found, and the individual will convince themselves somewhere along the line that they're the bad object. Or second tendency is a good object will be found, and then the individual, the anti-libidinal ego, will come in and put them in a position where they are inadvertently turning into the bad object. And the third tendency tends to be that the person flat out finds a bad object, known or unbeknownst to themselves, usually unbeknownst. The other iteration through Pan's military involvement takes shape in his panic nature, his inducing of panic and fear. This is interesting because it tends to happen outside of battle. It's not usually in the action. You know, Pan isn't entering in the battle. He's waiting until these armies, whether it's the Titans, because he comes to the aid of the Olympian gods, or at the Battle of Marathon or the Gauls, you know, he tends to kind of hang out, and when the opposing army is at rest, he impedes and creates noise amplified through echoes. This brings our attention to issues of space, power, control, in a different way than with the nymphs. You know, whereas with the nymphs, there are issues of personal relational boundaries. With Pan's military involvement, we're directed toward broader collective establishment of space, the maintenance of that space as it's expressed through land, culture, national identity. In keeping with Pan as a figure of contradiction, through the perspective of the Greeks, he is a protector. Through the perspective of the invading armies, he is obviously a persecutor. And we can therefore, you know, appreciate this dichotomous nature of Pan's persecutor, protector role, and the coincidentia oppositorium. Echo holds a unique place in that she is a bit of the figure of Pan's relationship to the feminine, but also his relationship to the establishment of boundaries through national identity. She aids him in battle through amplifying the cacophony that he creates. Fontainebleau talks about how there is a simultaneous harmonious nature that binds Echo and Pan. They both create music together, but it's also discordant. And in the romance novel Daphnis and Chloe, Pan's pursuit of Echo, which again ends in failure like it does with Syrinx and Pitys, results in Pan having his followers chase her down and dismember her, coming to a very traumatizing culmination of that myth. When we hold Echo through the lens of trauma-related processes, we can think of her as the sonic embodiment of isolation and loneliness, which is certainly a feature in Pan's own subjective experience as a Greek figure, Greek deity, but also as a consequent experience of traumatic experiences. Another way of looking at this is how echoes are recurrent, right? And the nature of flashbacks or intrusive memories echoing across time. Echo loses her body quite literally and becomes a bodiless voice, right? Echoing through, and behaviorally, it invokes a kind of repetition behavior, a repeating, without a shift in any underlying behavioral or relational dynamic. The story of Pan and the Gulls is highlighted here for the purposes of considering the archetype of the other. So I'll share this passage from Philip Pergot. They camped where night overtook them retreating. Again, Pan's inclination to utilize the element of surprise. He is distant until he's not here. And so we have that dynamic tension between Pan being too distant and Pan intruding or possessing. But during the night, they were seized by panic terror. It is said that terror without reason comes from Pan. And the disturbance broke out among the soldiers in the deepening dusk. And at first, only a few were driven out of their minds. They thought they could hear an enemy attack and the hoofbeats of the horses coming for them. It was not long before madness ran through the whole force. They snatched up arms and killed one another, or were killed without recognizing their own language, or one another's faces, or even the shapes of their shields. They were so out of their minds that both sides thought the others were Greeks in Greek armor speaking Greek. And this madness from the god brought on a mutual massacre of the Gauls on a vast scale. So we have the most obvious demarcation of what constitutes an other here completely obliterated, which I think is fascinating, because Pan's complexes have an inherently othering quality, but we can see in this story that panic terror is creating an other within a culturally defined group that is not othered, and they're killing one another. So he abolishes boundaries here, while also kind of reinforcing them, if that's making any sense here. Just trying to find my notes here about, here we go. So the tactic employed here is dissolving autonomy. It shows up in the nymphs as personal autonomy. It shows up in these battles as group autonomy. And the results can be quite devastating. A reinforcement of distancing and othering, which we see all around us. Yeah, I think that's all I got to say for that one. So, wildness as its own archetype, as we looked at with the contrast with Apollo, it takes on its own othered nature, and let's hold this concept with complexity, and as I referenced at the beginning, Boris Nunley, and Dr. Nunley was very instrumental in helping me appreciate how concepts of wildness have been utilized to perpetuate violence against marginalized communities. Halbert Stam, in Wild Things, The Disorder of Desire, really explores themes around identity, and how wildness as identity and way of being is inherently in opposition to power structures that emphasize conformity, complacency, uniformity. Paradoxically, wildness is often constructed and defined by those in positions of power to perpetuate violence and establish control. And as we see in Halbert Stam's quote here, it is within the epistemologies established by colonial encounters, by colonial brutality, and by a colonial will to know that the wild is established as a space of otherness, of primitive anteriority, and as indigenous knowledge ripe for the taking. As we've discerned the wildness inherent in Pan's physiology, this dual nature, animal nature, human nature, and his positionality in the wild, it configures him within a space of otherness. Yet paradoxically, his behaviors stemming from activated complexes better reflect the actions of those in positions of privilege who are not othered, in the sense of their access to resources and power. hence the contradiction within his role as protector and persecutor, as it relates to the nymphs, Daphnis, who was a Greek shepherd that Pan pursued. In both sets of legends, the archetype of the other informs our understanding of how instinctual responses born out of unconscious desire and fear can lead to traumatic panic, splitting, and the violation of personal boundaries and autonomy. Robichaud, one of the authors of one of the books referenced at the beginning, he identifies both Pan and Dionysus as the most othered gods in the Greek pantheon, and that both are associated with states of madness. Dionysus with drunkenness, Pan with panic. This is a relief. I don't remember where this was found, but we have the two gods here in this image. Pan's death and the othering of the Great Mother. Hillman states, when Pan is dead, then nature can be controlled by the will of the new god, man. Humans, modeled in the image of Prometheus or Hercules, Apollo, creating from it and polluting in it without a troubled conscience. The way Pan's death enters the consciousness of ancient Greece is in keeping with his otherness, with his peripheral position. It occurs through an announcement by a disembodied voice who addresses a ship pilot, Thamus, and directs him to announce that Great Pan is dead. This voice is itself much like an echo. It comes across the water. It is sourceless, and it foreshadows the distance, essentially, that is to come between humans and the earth. It is so unceremonious. It's sad. I think it has this casual, minimizing, dismissive facet to it. And in its own way, it's very murky, mercurial, much like Pan's origins. This is vague, a vague announcement, and it's almost kind of like this agreement. Okay, so we're going to function now from a position of Pan, the great nature deity, being dead here. I think there's kind of a lot of resonance in the way that the sacred dark feminine was killed off, and Pan himself was killed off. So there's a kind of correspondence here in the Great Mother and Pan's death, as I think Rosemary was stating earlier. It brought attention to the sacred groves being cut down. So here we are, in a new paradigm, a pretty narcissistic paradigm, where the image of the divine is exclusively anthropomorphized. the result of Pan's death is a loss of belonging. And as Bourdieu brings our attention to, the loss of a sense of belonging is in fact an essential aspect of a collective phenomenon known as panic. So let's sit with the question for a moment here. What happens to a species when they lose their sense of belonging to the planet? Hellman brings our attention to two different characteristics of panic. He identifies one lived out in relation to a stimulus and called fear, and the other held in with no known stimulus and called anxiety. Thus, I think we could hold this in relation to climate change as a stimulus outside, creating panic in us, in increased chaos associated with climate change, increased othering, the precarious nature of the systems, economic, political, social, cultural, that have existed for a long time, enduring stress and pressure right now. And this other more nebulous, less material anxiety inside of us, the disconnection from Earth, from one another. If we remember Pan's kind of existing on this spectrum of connection and disconnection, his relentless pursuit of union with the other, his way of further distancing and isolating himself. But we're at this very far end of the spectrum of disconnection. A time when people can identify more corporate logos than plants. What does that do to the human psyche? The God who brings madness can also take it from us. And I like this image because it conveys Pan in a calmer state. His hypermasculine, impulsive, compulsive tendencies are not only at ease, but they're channeled through the creation of music here, the panpipes, and the dynamic tension between Pan and the feminine represented here is not one defined by a need for control, power, a need for possession, but instead there is a relaxed energy to the image, the painting. Neumann has a nice quote here about the Great Mother, and he states that the wreath of symbolic images surrounds not only one figure, but a great number of figures of great mothers who, as goddesses and fairies, female demons and nymphs, friendly and unfriendly, manifest the one great unknown. the Great Mother as the central aspect of the archetypal feminine in rites and myths, the religions and legends of mankind. Pan's connections with the nymphs, they bring him into the sphere of the Great Mother, expanding his role as a nature god while underscoring his relationship to the feminine. Remember the musical contest between Apollo and Pan at the beginning. And my offering, well, you know, things aren't so simple. Let's remember the principle of enantiodromia. When we identify exclusively with one attitude or principle without awareness of its shadow, we inadvertently constellate the opposite. Well, in this image depicted here, Apollo has accidentally killed Hyacinthus through the accident with the discs, right? The god of reason and rationality and order is the agent of a traumatic, unintended death. And Pan's witnessing of this event in the statue is what really moves me, and the smirk on his face. You can see it, you know, look at what your inflation has led to. Pan as shepherd of the future, bringing us into a future, regardless of what future that is. He depicts both paths. And Jung describes two ends to instinctual behavior. Pan's domain with the instincts. You know, Pan is the god of the central nervous system, the god of panic, fight, flight, or freeze responses, or fawn responses, and the Roman fawns, right, influenced by his characteristic traits and attributes. So Jung describes two ends of instinctual behavior. At the one, a compulsive, archaic behavior pattern. At the other, archetypal images. Thus, instinct acts and at the same time forms an image of its action. The images trigger the actions. The actions are patterned by the images. Here's a key sentence. And Christine, you brought in imagination right at the beginning. Thus, any transformation of the images affects the patterns of behavior, so that what we do with our imagination is of instinctual significance, which I find powerful. As we're kind of starting to hear more in the collective, you know, whose dream are we living in right now? And who gets to dream that dream? We got Pan, the instincts, the instinctual behavior from which we are increasingly dissociated from through technology. I heard a phrase recently that in the tech world, like a keyboard made of grass, April Fool's Day joke going around. Like, I guess it's an expression in the tech community, you know, go put your hands in the grass. go touch the grass. And an image of a keyboard made out of grass was going around on Monday. Glenn Slater, that's what I was trying to think of earlier, right? With Jung and Jung versus Borg. Brilliant. I don't know if you've had him at the Western Massachusetts Association, but a lot to say on this. The one end of the pole, the archetypal image. You've got the archetype of the neglected child, the orphan, the abandoned child, which feeds into the patterned archaic behavior exhibited in Pan's compulsive need to possess the other, be it the nymphs, shepherds, or goat herds. And of course, that pattern reinforces the story. You see it in all of these different iterations. This painting to the left is titled in Italian, Love Conquers All. I think a play on the misinterpreted meaning of Pan's name, all. Pan is being chastised, a form of rejection. And what does this do, right? It reinforces the compulsive act, the panaleptic complex of possession in the attempts to defend against isolation, rejection, loneliness. The title of the painting to the right, though, Love Conquers All, I think can instruct us in the possibility of moving forward. Love as an instinct. This is Eros, Cupid, regulating Pan, if it could be received that way, right? Not as rejection. Hillman and Robichaud talk about Pan's depiction in a lot of art as being removed from the central action, as we can see here. Not sure if that's Psyche he's consoling, might be. We've got Aphrodite here, I think, with Eros. Might be that Pan is consoling Psyche here, given her tasks assigned to her by Aphrodite. But I want to kind of stay with the image as Pan is removed. And Hillman talks about that as demonstrating Pan's potential to interrupt the compulsion, to pause the impulse, and as any good shepherd or goat herd, to observe, to detect patterns, the movement of the flocks. So intrapsychically, that would be the pause, right, before the action, scanning the movement of internal energy, our own inner wild flocks. Collectively, as a pause, let's reflect and imagine the best path forward. Envision that. And another depiction of Pan removed here, the Feast of the Gods. How debaucherous is this? And Pan on the floor, removed, Creating music again. You know, he seems to be in some kind of positive relationship with essentially being ignored, marginalized. I think we could infer here that he has been able to implement the principle of reflection, which Jung identified as an instinct, an instinctual capacity, reflection. And he is being observed by Hercules, I would imagine. Someone correct me at the end if I'm mistaken. I can't see the comments here. My screen though. I'll be done in a few minutes and we can go to Q&A. The famous statue of Aphrodite and Eros and Pan depicts and embodies the tension of the opposites, the masculine principle contained in Pan, feminine principle contained in Aphrodite, the instincts in Pan, love, beauty in Aphrodite, mediated by Eros, by Cupid. Fascinating. Mediated or potentially Pan is pushed away. I think we can interpret it as both. The art critics probably, I think, the consensus is Pan is getting pushed away. But there is not panic in Eros's face or Aphrodite's face. This is a subjective interpretation, of course, but I think this image can convey the possibility of mediating these tensions rather than acting out of them. Another image that is referenced by Bourgault and by Fontaine recently is the circle dance. Pan is in the center of the nymphs who are dancing around him. And you can see in this ancient statue here, emblem, that Pan is playing the pipes. You can see the horns and the dancing movement of the nymphs around him. Fontaine has beautiful passages analyzing this image. The dynamic engagement and containment of Pan's wildness and instinctual energy, not a neglect or repression of it, but a way of relating to it and channeling it. And this is depicted in other images. Let's go back to end to the instincts and Jung's observation that at the two ends of that pole, we have the archetypal image and the archaic patterned behavior. The archetypal core of a complex that influences these patterns of behavior for Pan, the abandoned child, the wounded attachment. When that is interrupted through reflection and imagination, we can appreciate a different patterned behavior here. And the story of Psyche and Pan, who consoles Psyche after her attempted suicide. She has a moment of despair. How could she ever successfully accomplished the task set before her by Aphrodite when she had gazed upon Eros's face when he came to visit her in the night. In that despair, she throws herself into the river, into the unconscious, which does not accept her, pushes her to shore. And who does she meet but Pan the goat herd? He doesn't act out on these impulses. He receives her with compassion, with tenderness, and no, you cannot give up on this quest, Psyche. And with that imaginative capacity, the capacity for reflection, we can appreciate the transformation of these pattern instinctual behaviors and how they might occur throughout Pan's lifespan, leading to the capacity for joy, the capacity for being at one with himself in aloneness, and even in states of grief or melancholy, which I think are, Andrew, as you pointed out when we were talking, are contained in this image here. With the moon behind him, entered nighttime consciousness. So that is all I have here. Happy to have a Q&A. I'm not an expert on Pan. I just spent a little bit of time with Pan. I hope I've offered something for you or stimulated your imagination. One question that I think would be interesting for us to talk about are contemporary manifestations of Pan. Thank you, everyone, very, very much. And the list of references, if you want to take a photograph, or it will be available, of course, in the video.